perspective on the world.
And uncover the stories behind the latest trends. Join us for the media show. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
For me, trust is about presence.
About fostering relationships all around the world, over years.
It's about patience, not rushing to be the first,
But striving to get it right.
to get to the truth.
We can't just ask the questions.
We have to question the answers. Debate, debate, debate. We have to create a space for opposing voices to be heard.
And challenged.
We fight every day.
To earn your trust.
And we never take it for granted.
We capture the story.
Fact check the story.
Break the story.
We explore the story.
So you can trust us to tell it.
I will give away the vast majority of my money. It's my full-time focus for the rest of my life.
Und wenn Menschen bei uns in Europa angekommen sind, dann finde ich, haben sie ein Recht darauf, menschlich behandelt zu werden.
He really truly loved this regime and Vladimir Putin. That's why Vladimir Putin hated him so much.
Every time I lost, I just did a deep dive into the reason why we lost.
There are times when I have noticed something more emotional in one take than the other, which I think comes from being a woman.
When the big names talk, they talk to us.
Live from London, this is BBC News. The US is evacuating some staff from Iraq, Kuwait and Bahrain. Following reports, Israel is ready to launch an operation against Iran. A third night of violence in Northern Ireland as petrol bombs are thrown at police and a leisure centre is set on fire. A second overnight curfew has come into effect in parts of Los Angeles after nearly a week of protests and riots over immigration raids. And coming up in Business Today, it's another season of record earnings for European football. But what impact is this having on the fans? Hello and welcome to BBC News. I'm Lokwesa Burak and we're going to begin with the developing story. And the United States is evacuating some staff and their families from its embassy in Iraq, as well as from military bases in Kuwait and Bahrain. American officials say there are heightened security risks in the region and have reportedly been told that Israel is ready to launch an operation against Iran. The US anticipates that Iran could then retaliate on certain US sites in Iraq. It comes as US talks over Iran's nuclear program appear to have stalled in recent days. The US Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, is still planning to meet Iranian officials for the 6th round of talks on Sunday. So let's speak to our North America correspondent, Jake Kwan in Washington. Hello there to you, Jake. What details do we know about this latest development and the security risks?
Well, we heard earlier that the U.S. has given the order to evacuate its non-essential staff from Baghdad and the dependents from there, as well as given the order to evacuate some of its citizens from the region. Now, we didn't understand exactly why, but soon we learned that it was because the U.S. was told that Israel is fully ready to launch an operation into Iran, and that the U.S. fears a retaliation from the Iranians on the U.S. bases. And we heard just exactly that from the Iranian defense minister earlier today, saying that if Iran were to be attacked, they would retaliate by targeting targeting the U.S. military bases in the region. Now, the U.S. does have about 2,500 troops in Iraq, and that the U.S. fears that some of its personnel in the region are in danger. Now, when President Trump was asked about the evacuation order, he said that it is a dangerous place and we will have to see what happens. And he didn't really offer any more details beyond that. And it is unclear whether the attack by the Israelis on the Iranians is imminent. It simply could be that they are fully ready. That does not mean the attack is coming very soon. But it is a clear sign that the tension in the region is escalating, and the Iranians watching this evacuation will see it as one of the strongest signs that an attack is coming.
But, Jake, many people would say, this has almost come out of the blue. What has actually triggered the escalation? We have upcoming talks taking place, I think it's in Muscat, on Sunday. Why have things suddenly flipped so very quickly?
That's right. And we understand that the talk in Muscat is still going to happen. And Steve Witkoff, who is the special envoy of President Trump, will be heading over on Sunday. Now, the talk has been going on for weeks now, and President Trump has imposed this 2-month deadline almost 2 months ago. So there is this growing frustration in the White House that the talk is not moving at the speed that President Trump would like, and that there is this feeling maybe the Iranians are not as forthcoming and that they are perhaps stalling the talks. And President Trump is not only talking to Iranians, but he's talking to Israelis. And he had a phone call with Israeli Prime Minister on Monday where Mr. Netanyahu was essentially trying to convince President Trump that the time for the talk is over and that now is time to really pull out the military option in this talk to keep the nuclear weapon out of Iranian hands. So President Trump has been losing faith that there could be a deal coming very soon. And this is why some of the analysts are saying that maybe this is a way for the White House to signal to the Iranians that the runway for a diplomatic talk is coming to an end.
OK, Jake, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. A leisure centre has been set on fire in the town of Lowe in Northern Ireland after its windows were smashed by people wearing masks. It comes after 2 nights of violence in Ballymena, around 20 miles away. Rioting broke out there on Monday after a protest about an alleged sexual assault that took place in the town. The Police Service of Northern Ireland had already requested help from other forces in the wake of the violence, which it described as racist thuggery. Our Ireland correspondent, Sarah Gervin, reports from Ballymena.
For the 3rd night in a row, Ballymena burned. Police officers came under attack with bottles, bricks and fireworks. In response, they deployed police dogs and water cannon. Baton rounds were also fired. 20 miles away in Larne, fires were set at a leisure centre by young people wearing masks. Extensive smoke damage was caused. The building had provided emergency shelter for families in urgent need following the disturbances in Ballymena, but they're no longer using the centre. The local council said the families have all been safely relocated. Politicians said customers were using the facilities when the attack began.
The swimming club was on, there was classes of yoga, there was a class of women who were doing exercise, and a brick came through one of the windows while they were doing it. It is not in any way acceptable form of protest to attack a leisure centre that is used by everybody. The staff had to barricade themselves and then run out the back door.
The disorder first began on Monday after a peaceful protest over an alleged sexual assault. Police have described the violence of the past few days as racist thuggery targeted at ethnic minorities and police officers. Police Scotland has agreed to send reinforcements after police in Northern Ireland requested support from other forces to help deal with the trouble. 36 police officers have now been injured and 6 arrests made. For now, multiple appeals for calm have gone unheeded. Sarah Gervin, BBC News in Ballymena.
A curfew in downtown Los Angeles is now in effect for a second night as protests there against the Trump administration's immigration enforcement continue. Police say they carried out mass arrests following the introduction of a partial curfew in downtown districts of LA overnight into Wednesday. President Donald Trump has sparked controversy by deploying troops to Los Angeles against the wishes of LA's mayor and California's governor. Well, now the US Defense Department says 700 US Marines could be on the streets of LA as soon as Thursday. Meanwhile, protests similar to those in LA are popping up in other major cities, including New York and Washington, with more demonstrations planned in the coming days. Well, in the last few hours, President Trump gave his reaction to the situation in LA whilst attending a showing of Les Miserables at Washington's Kennedy Center.
What we have is a situation in Los Angeles that was caused by gross incompetence. They didn't have the police to handle it. The police were asking us to come in. They were very late. We had to go in to save a lot of ICE officers, as you know, who were held up. They were holed up in a building, and they were being attacked. And the military went in, the National Guard went in and got them. The police weren't able, unfortunately, to move fast enough, but we moved fast enough. And while we were there, we stayed there, and we stopped tremendous destruction and death.
Well, let's cross to Los Angeles and speak to our news correspondent there, Carl Nasman. Hello there to you, Carl. So curfew is now in force. What's it like?
Yeah, second night of curfew here in downtown Los Angeles. And well, take a look for yourself. This is the scene right here where there were mass protests just 24 hours ago. Even during that curfew, police had trouble clearing this area in the early hours. Now it's almost a ghost town. We're some of the few people out here. Media do get an exception to this curfew. They're allowed out. That's a line of police vehicles there just traveling up the street. There are some pockets, we should say, of demonstrators that are still left on the streets. There was a fairly large contingent that decided to make their way out of the curfew zone. So that's something that officials will be having to deal with tonight. But again, this is simply a 1 square mile area of downtown Los Angeles that is under this curfew order for a second night in a row, beginning at 8 p.m., extending until 6 a.m. So it's not even the entire area of downtown Los Angeles. It's certainly not martial law across the entire city. And this would probably go against what we just heard the president saying, that, you know, the Marines or the National Guard are necessary to maintain order. It looks like right now local authorities, because out here behind us, this is Los Angeles County Sheriffs, this is Los Angeles City Police. They're the ones doing this policing right now, enforcing this curfew, and they want to prevent some of those more chaotic scenes that we had seen playing out over the past couple of nights here in downtown Los Angeles.
Carl, I wonder, you've mentioned the downtown area of LA a fair bit. Why have protesters focused on this part of LA?
Yeah, this is really where some of the main protests began. This is where those federal buildings are, and actually just behind our view, just behind the camera, so you can't see it tonight, but you know, you probably saw those scenes earlier. This is where we saw many hundreds, even up to 1,000 people gathered outside of a detention center where the immigrants who've been detained by ICE agents were actually taken. So along with these protests, we've been seeing several days in a row of immigration enforcement actions across Los Angeles and surrounding areas. There were several more today. That's what's really kicked off these protests. People here are very upset about what they say are inappropriate actions to target immigrant communities rather than targeting the worst of the criminals, as President Trump pledged to do during his campaign. Of course, the White House insists that the people that they are targeting do have criminal backgrounds. But you know, remember, Los Angeles County, the biggest county in the United States, it has the largest concentration of undocumented immigrants in the country. So people here really taking that personally, very angry. And we've been following those demonstrations throughout the day today. People still out there wanting these ICE agents to leave, telling President Trump to back off on his policy of deportations. And they're also angry about the presence of that National Guard that the president has ordered into the city. For now, LaQuesta, just a bit of background on them. You know, they're really only guarding those federal buildings. We haven't seen them taking place in the policing. They're not the ones out here enforcing the curfew. That's local officials themselves.
And very quickly, Carl, people of Los Angeles are very proud that it has a status of being a sanctuary city. Could you just explain to us what that means?
Sure, and Los Angeles isn't the only sanctuary city in the country, and there's several even in California, and some people here think that might be one reason why President Trump and the Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents have decided to really focus here. This is a city that has laws on its books that actually prevents local authorities from working with the federal authorities when it comes to immigration enforcement. They don't share information about immigration status when they do something like a traffic stop. And that's because they say that makes the community safer. That means, that no matter who you are, if you're documented or undocumented, you wouldn't be afraid to report something like crime to police. If you're a child, you wouldn't be afraid to go to school. So that's the reason behind those kinds of laws. And this is a city that enacted that law late last year. Passed that through the city council. So Los Angeles, one of many sanctuary cities across the country, and that's shaping up to be another one of those battles between Donald Trump and federal authorities and state level and local laws.
Carl Nasman, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Now, the Israeli and US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has accused Hamas of killing at least 5 people in an attack on a bus transporting Palestinians working for the organisation. The BBC cannot independently verify the statement by the group, which was set up earlier this year and bypasses established UN humanitarian operations. This comes as local medical staff say dozens more Palestinians were killed or injured by Israeli soldiers on Wednesday as they tried to access food at a GHF distribution centre. Well, let's get some of the day's other news now, and search and rescue operations are underway in South Africa's Eastern Cape province after floods killed at least 49 people. Amongst the dead are 6 school children and 2 drivers who were swept away in a minibus. 4 children remain unaccounted for. Officials are describing the floods as the worst natural disaster in decades. The area has been hit by torrential rain as well as unusually low temperatures that brought heavy snowfall. Austria's president has raised the possibility of tightening gun laws after Tuesday's deadly mass shooting. Alexander van der Bellen was speaking during a visit to the city of Graz, where a man shot dead 9 children and a teacher at a high school before killing himself. Police say the attacker had 2 guns, which he owned legally. And the UK and EU say they've reached a political agreement about Gibraltar. The government said the deal would protect the sovereignty of the British overseas territory whilst avoiding the need for checks on people and goods moving across the border to Spain. The agreement was one of the last remaining issues to be settled after Brexit. Around the world and across the UK, you're watching BBC News. The NHS is to be given an extra £29 billion as part of the government's spending plans for the next 4 years. The Chancellor's spending review saw extra investment for defence, housing and transport, but other departments were hit with budget cuts. The Conservatives have accused Rachel Reeves of adopting a spend now, tax later approach, as our business correspondent Mark Ashdown now reports.
Card, cash, yeah, perfect, thank you.
The haggling is over, the budgets are set, and today we find out the government's spending plans. Here in Woking, the council has had years of financial difficulties and people are keen to see services improve.
I have 4 kids myself and I'm constantly looking for new things, and that's something I would definitely kind of prioritise.
So investment in children's sort of services, things to do?
Yeah, anything to help mothers.
So you'd like to see more money spent on the NHS?
Well, they could always spend more money on it, yeah. I mean, I've been waiting a long time now for an operation.
The council facilities that we access and the transportation networks, the roads, I think all these things together need to be improved.
So you've got to spend money on everything?
He needs to spend money on everything. Plus, we need to create jobs.
The government wants to increase total spending by 1.2% in real terms over the next 3 years. Last year, £202 billion was spent on health and social care, 40% of all spending. Historically, that's risen by an average of 3.6% a year. It's not clear if that will continue. Defence spending is set to increase to 2.5% of GDP by 2027. That's an extra £6.4 billion. So depending on the Chancellor's decisions, budgets for non-protected departments could be facing cuts of up to 1.8%.
Some areas of spending will fall over the next 3 years, and they'll probably be the ones they always seem to be, which are the so-called unprotected bits: justice, home office, local government, those sorts of things.
Budgets for local councils could come under even more pressure then. And remember, they fund everything from children's social services to adult social care, bin collections and amenities like leisure centres and libraries. And it has been a tough time. Over the past 5 years, 6 local authorities, including Woking, have in effect had to declare themselves bankrupt. The government is hoping big investment projects can create jobs and infrastructure to speed up economic growth. But some day-to-day spending decisions are likely to be tough and will affect local services across the country. Mark Ashdown, BBC News.
The disgraced Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein has been found guilty on one charge of sexual assault at a retrial in New York. He was found not guilty of a second sex assault charge. The jury hasn't yet reached a verdict on a third count of rape. Weinstein's previous conviction was overturned by a state appeals court last year. From New York, here's Neda Tawfik.
News of the split verdict came after 5 days of intense jury deliberations, where it was revealed in court that jurors were screaming, fighting, that threats were exchanged. It got to a point where the judge had to remind them that this case needed to be decided on the facts presented in court alone. So it was a bit of a surprise when we found that jurors were able to reach a unanimous decision on 2 of the 3 counts, finding Weinstein guilty of performing forcible oral sex on Mimi Haley, a production assistant, in 2006. In a statement, Miriam Haley said she was grateful to jurors for seeing through what she said were some of the tactics of the defense to really hide what she called undeniable facts of the case. But jurors found Weinstein not guilty on another count related to a young Polish model who was testifying for the first time in this case. Now, jurors were told to go home for the day and to cool off, but they will resume deliberations on Thursday on that third count of rape against Jessica Mann. In a statement, Jessica Mann said she would never lie about rape. Now, Weinstein's attorneys have reacted to this by saying that this process has some real issues that they plan to explore on appeal. Weinstein himself has repeatedly denied the allegations against him. When his first trial was overturned last year, it was seen as a massive blow to the Me Too movement. So many are watching this case to see the outcome.
And that was an Neda Tawfik there. Some of the biggest names in music have been paying tribute to the Beach Boys frontman, Brian Wilson, who's died at the age of 82. Bob Dylan said he'd spent years admiring Wilson's genius. Elton John describing him as a true giant. In a statement posted online, his family said, "We are heartbroken to announce that our beloved father, Brian Wilson, has passed away. We are at a loss for words right now." He wrote or co-wrote more than 24 top 40 hits for the band, including God Only Knows, California Girls and Good Vibrations. Let's speak to the entertainment journalist, Jeannie Wolfe now, who's joining us from LA. Hello there to you, Jeannie.
Hi.
Yeah, the tributes are flowing in, and many musicians, his peers within the industry, describing his genius. What exactly did they mean by that? He was of his time, or was it his legacy?
I think it was his legacy, but I think it was his music. I mean, they really acknowledged him. Pet Sounds was not a successful album when it first came out in the U.S., but every famous musician, every musician who knew what he was talking about, said that it was a genius, that it was like nothing that had ever been in a studio before. And I think because his songs were so joyous and fun for us to sing to, we didn't appreciate them. We love them, but we didn't appreciate them in the way great musicians can, who see the originality and the invention that he put into producing every song.
And you know, a lot of the Beach Boy hits had to do with the harmonies, and it was the fact that they were essentially a family, weren't they?
They were really a family, and yet the harmonies were great. But what made their music great was that they were just the first, was something that was just all out fun. And Brian Wilson, who was a very troubled man for most of his life, said that all he wanted to do was write music that made other people feel good. He wanted to write happy songs, and you wonder why he could reflect that so well when he had such a tragic life.
Yeah, he wasn't a surfer for a start, which surprising many. He was
surfers.
not a surfer, but he sang about, you know, the surfing lifestyle, the outdoor lifestyle, essentially, of California. But what was he like behind the scenes? What do we know?
Well, in person, he was extremely shy, hated being the front man, loved it because he loved the music, and he was very competitive. I mean, they could never get over their rivalry with the Beatles, even long after times when they would do better than them. But Brian had many troubled years where he really disappeared off the scene, and was helped by a very controversial psychiatrist to make himself better. He was 300 pounds. He wasn't getting out of bed in the morning. He wrote that song In My Room, and he said that's where he wanted to be. And somehow he reached deep inside, got himself together, and went back to the music, lost the weight, and still was not someone willing to do a lot of interviews or have a lot of fun, but he had a great second relationship with his second wife. And as much as he regretted, he said that the only regrets in his life were that he took too many drugs and that he let himself go in that direction. And the other thing he regretted is that he has two daughters, singers, and he never was around them. And, you know, in his later years, he came to understand some of the things that he had missed in life. You know, I just want to roll down my windows and drive back by Malibu and sing Good Vibrations and remember just how much fun it was to go to one of their concerts or just to even hear their songs on the radio.
Jeannie Wolfe, we'll leave it there for now, but thank you very much. I think, yeah, lots of tributes to be heard blasting out of cars today in the state of California. Well, do stay with us because in a couple of moments, I'll be taking you through the big stories from the business world. And one of those stories, of course, is the ongoing discussion regarding tariffs and essentially the deal, or what we know of the deal, or what little we know of the deal between China and the US. And we understand that will include rare earths. Stay with us for that. You're watching BBC News.
Hello, there are three main ingredients in our weather story for the next couple of days. Some warmth, some humidity, and some thunderstorms. Those thunderstorms drifting up from the southwest. Across the southwest of England, Wales and Northern Ireland, we will see some very heavy thundery downpours through the day. Could be enough rain in places to give some localised flooding and travel disruption, with some thunder and lightning and potentially some squally gusty winds as well. A few scattered showers and thunderstorms breaking out across central, eastern and northern parts of England. Much of Scotland will be dry. It's going to feel very warm and very humid. In the sunny spots, highs of 24 or 25 degrees. So outbreaks of rain, perhaps still thundery in places, drifting northwards during Thursday night and on into Friday. Could turn quite murky around some western and southern coasts. Still quite warm and quite humid, 11 to 15 degrees as we start Friday morning. On Friday, we will see some spells of sunshine, some scattered showers and thunderstorms here and there. Some particularly intense thunderstorms just starting to push up from the south as we head towards the end of the afternoon. Temperatures in eastern England could get to 28 or 29 degrees. Some really vicious thunderstorms are possible during Friday night and into Saturday. But as that weather system clears through, it will eventually turn drier and fresher as we head through the weekend. You can check your weekend forecast on the BBC Weather app.
There are not many people in the world who are known just by one name, Arnie. Arnold Schwarzenegger is definitely on that short list. I've come to Austria to talk to the activist and actor, so don't miss it. Arnold Schwarzenegger with me, Laura Kunsberg, in the interview on BBC News.
As some of the UK's biggest retailers are hit by cyber attacks, should a company ever pay a ransom to the hackers? Many do, despite the advice not to. So I'll talk to one of the country's biggest cybersecurity chiefs and a ransom negotiator. Join us this week on Talking Business here on BBC News.
Drone strikes in Ukraine and Russia, prisoner exchanges and occasional rounds of negotiation, but still no sign of a ceasefire. Donald Trump said he could end this conflict, but he hasn't yet. For more on the war in Ukraine, join me, Paul Adams, here on BBC News.
What does it take to become a top opera star? I'm on a mission to find out how opera is trying to attract new audiences and reinvent itself.
A lot of people find crossing the threshold of an opera house quite difficult.
It's very, very important that we expose our young talent to the best that the business has to offer.
That's Take Me to the Opera with me, Zainab Badawi. Watch on iPlayer.
The key question is, where do we begin?
Who do you want to go for?
It went up. You can't be proud of that.
Indeed, it did go up.
And you are making the choice not to do that. That's right, isn't it?
Big questions.
Isn't that the definition of political opportunism?
Unmissable moments.
Classic BBC there. Classic. Oh, yeah.
Newsnight.
Thanks, everyone.
With Victoria Derbyshire. Weeknights at 10:30 on BBC Two and iPlayer.
Now on BBC News, the latest business news from across the globe. Business Today.
Hey, big spender. UK Chancellor Rachel Reeves lays out her plans for £1 trillion of public money. But will they keep voters and investors happy, plus boost?
In place of decline, I choose investments. In place of pessimism, division and defeatism, I choose national renewal.
The Chancellor has completely lost control. This is the spend now, tax later review.
Also coming up, trade war or trade peace. After a truce with China, the US says it could extend its 90-day tariff pause with the rest of the world. Plus, the right to a childhood. The world pledged to end child labour by this year. So why are 138 million kids still being forced to work, often in harsh and dangerous conditions? And still scoring another season of record earnings for European football, but with fans more squeezed than ever. Our cash-hungry clubs taking their eye off the ball. Hello and live from London, this is Business Today. I'm Lokwesa Burak and we begin the programme here in the UK with the mind-boggling challenge of how best to spend £1 trillion. That was the task for Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves. She set out how she'll allocate public money over the next 4 years. Wednesday's spending review was about renewing Britain, she said, with more than £100 billion for projects including nuclear power, defence and transport. Overall, government department budgets will grow by 2.3% above inflation per year. The Foreign Office and the Home Office, and also the Department for the Environment, will get less than that. Defence, health and science and technology will get more. Now, the biggest winner is the National Health Service in England. It gets an extra £29 billion a year for day-to-day running, and that was actually more than was expected. And there's £39 billion for social and affordable housing in England over 10 years. Our economics editor, Faisal Islam, has been crunching through the numbers, and he says behind the spending on day-to-day services and the winners and losers amongst government departments, the big story is the amount being invested into long-term infrastructure projects.
So the big picture about this spending review, though, is really about investing. And this is an important chart showing the rate of investment by the government as a percentage of the economy. This is now over the half decade, the highest sustained period of investment that we've seen since the early 1980s, well above what they inherited from the Conservatives. And it's occurring because of a change the Chancellor made to her borrowing rules. It's a big deal. They hope that this will lever in lots of private investment too. Now, timing for investment, take a look at this. So much of this was front-loaded in the first couple of years and then falls away because they want to see spades in the ground. But some of these projects, like Northern Powerhouse Rail between Liverpool and Manchester, are at a very, very early conceptual stage. But then take a look at the day-to-day spending again. Big squeeze there at the end, you can see, in the final years of the decade. That is tough, even potentially for schools and hospitals. And it's not wild speculation to expect the hope from the government would be being to afford a little top-up here towards the end of the decade. But if the Chancellor sticks to her borrowing rules, that would mean yet more tax rises. The big hope is that faster economic growth solves the problem.
And that was Faisal Islam, while the opposition Conservatives described the Chancellor's plans as a spend now, tax later review. But she told our political editor, Chris Mason, that she is investing in the UK's future.
I'm not going to apologise for making the long-term decisions in our country's interest, but whether it's investment in things like new nuclear power stations or carbon capture and storage or new transport investment in Manchester or Leeds or the North East, it may take time for those trams and those trains to arrive, but we'll have spades in the ground in this Parliament, creating good jobs for local people in communities all across the UK.
And despite the big spending plans, the reaction on financial markets was muted on Wednesday, with yields on UK debt, that's the government's borrowing costs, largely holding steady. But longer term, investors want to see evidence that Rachel Reeves' policies can restore growth to the UK economy. As Mohammed El-Erian, advisor to the insurance giant Alliance and the president of Queen's College, Cambridge, told the BBC's Newsnight programme.
We need an innovation policy, which we have not got yet. We're going to get more details on the industrial policy side. And she's going to be judged ultimately in terms of can she deliver higher productivity and higher growth. The country badly needs that. Without that, we have a debt problem. We have all sorts of other problems. So ultimately, she will be judged on growth.
OK, Bronwyn Curtis is chair of the 24 Income Fund here in London. She also, until recently, chaired the oversight board for the government's spending watchdog. That is the Office for Government Responsibility, known also as the OBR. Hello, Bronwyn. Welcome to the programme. We'll get to the question over whether enough is being done for growth in a moment. But essentially, for people watching at home, what they want to know is how does this translate into their lives tomorrow, the next week, the next month?
Well, actually, spending is quite restrained. There is extra spending on things like health, defence and so on. So I think they won't see much change, to be honest, because there hasn't been much money to distribute. Now, it will be a bit better. We saw actually some growth in the first quarter of this year, which was unexpected. So I think things are okay, but what people worry about, it's all right, we spend the money now, but as others said, what happens in the back end of this Parliament? So in 2 or 3 years' time, will they have to raise taxes? Now, the belief is that they might have to raise taxes as soon as the end of this year when we have a new budget. So I think people are concerned about that. The trust is not there yet.
So when people are asking the question of how is she going to pay for all this, the answer essentially is the possibility of taxes come autumn, you're saying?
Yes, we probably will have to put taxes up in the autumn. And of course, putting taxes up means that people get less optimistic, they spend less, so growth is much harder to come by. It's not that there's these decisions on infrastructure across the country are really good ones. The trouble is, we need them desperately, but they're long term. And you won't see the impact of that until 3 years, 5 years, even 10 years' time. They're really good decisions, but probably this government won't see them.
Yes, so the question of has she done enough to boost economic growth in terms of the gamble she's taking between the economic wealth of the country and the wealth of Labour's future is one that is being posed at the moment. But is it also likely to encourage private investment? Because some people are saying the only people who will benefit out of this are the private companies who will be doing the building.
Well, they will benefit, of course, but I think the whole country will benefit if we have better infrastructure, if we have more secure energy, those things. It is good for the country in the long term. It is good for productivity. It is good for growth, but it won't happen in the short term. And everyone does look for a quick fix. That's not going to happen. But over a period of time, they are good decisions. The trouble is that growth between now and 2 or 3 years' time still be muted. But I think these decisions had to be made. It's just a question of now what will happen to spending, because she's put a lot of spending up front, and that means she's going to squeeze spending towards the end of the term.
Bronwyn Curtis, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And we're staying with the UK's finances because several government departments are facing cuts to their budgets, and press reports are warning that tens of thousands of jobs could go as a result. Martin Kavanagh is the National President of the Public and Commercial Services Union, which is the UK's largest union representing government workers. It's great to have you with us, Martin. A statement on your website says that you're going to fight hard to defend your members from threats that may arise out of this review. What are those threats?
I mean, clearly, whilst there is an average increase in departmental budgets, as you quite rightly said in the opening of the show, the reality is for the likes of the Home Office, for the likes of Culture, Media and Sport, for the likes of EFRA, that there are real-term cuts to those budgets, and clearly that not only leaves an uncertain future in terms of jobs for our members, but also as well to the vital services that our members provide, and that is a real worry and a real concern this morning for our members and for our union.
You also said that you're going to persuade the government to deliver properly funded, good quality public services. Could you give a few examples of how you'd advise the government?
I mean, we have a very clear view that actually what we need is a proper taxation system in this country, where those who are more able to foot the bill and shoulder the taxation bill should be the ones who are made to pay more for those taxes. And so certainly to chase down the billions of pounds that are evaded and avoided in taxation every year are clearly key to that, to get money into the exchequer. But also as well, we believe in properly funded public services, and so cutting back on disability benefits is not going to improve the economic situation in this country. In fact, it's going to make it worse for over 1 million people. We believe over 1.2 million people will either be plunged into poverty or have their poverty deepened over this period of time. So we want proper investment into public services, and we believe that that will put more money into our members' pockets. The one real thing missing from yesterday for our members' perspective is there's nothing on the cost of living, nothing that is going to help them pay their household bills right now, their energy bills, etc. And as your last contributor said, people want to see real terms investment, not only in the public services that they use day to day, but also in their ability to spend themselves. And this hasn't delivered it.
OK. Martin Kavanagh, thank you very much indeed. To President Trump's trade war now, because he's told reporters that he'd be willing to extend the July the 8th deadline for sweeping new US tariffs on foreign goods, but doesn't think it'll be necessary. The president was taking questions ahead of a performance of Les Mis at the Kennedy Center in Washington. He said talks were ongoing, but he'd soon be presenting many countries with take it or leave it deals.
Well, we're dealing with Japan, we're dealing with South Korea, we're dealing with a lot of them. We're dealing with about 15 countries, but as you know, we have about 150 plus. And you can't do that. So we're going to be sending letters out in about a week and a half, 2 weeks, to countries and telling them what the deal is, like I did with EU.
And are you happy with the EU right now? You were unhappy with them about 10 days ago.
Well, I'll let you know in about a week.
And that was President Trump there. And those comments came after the US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told Congress that their 90-day pause on reciprocal tariffs could be extended for trading partners who are seen as negotiating in good faith. Here's the BBC's North America business correspondent, Michelle Fleury.
With a July 8th deadline looming for dozens of countries to strike tariff agreements with the White House, the Trump administration is hinting that there may be some flexibility. Speaking at a congressional hearing on Wednesday, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said the US might let the deadline slide for trading partners where talks are going well.
It will be up to President Trump, but it is my belief that if someone is negotiating in good faith, that an extension will be possible.
That's great news.
And in conversations with USTR Ambassador Greer, it's my belief that with smaller countries where we have lower levels of trade, we may be able to do a one-size-fits-all regional deal.
You may recall President Trump imposed sweeping global tariffs on April 2nd, then paused most of them a few days later to allow for what the administration promised would be 90 deals in 90 days. So far, there has been only one agreement with the UK, one extension with the EU, and of course that breakthrough this week with China, which saw Beijing agree to grant US export licenses for rare earth metals, although the Wall Street Journal is reporting that those will only be temporary. In return, the US is making certain concessions, such as allowing Chinese students to attend US colleges and universities. Now, all of this does still need to be rubber-stamped by the two leaders, but essentially it puts relations between these two superpowers back to where they were a month ago. Meanwhile, US stocks closed lower on Wednesday. For Wall Street, the Treasury Secretary's comments are being interpreted as a sign that certainty is still a ways off.
OK, let's bring in Fiona Cincotta from City Index. Hello there to you, Fiona. So it sounds as if Mr. Trump is potentially rowing back somewhat and the market's fairly muted.
Yes, that's right. I think we'd say that the markets are a little bit underwhelmed. I mean, you know, where there have been the announcement of this agreement, but details are a little bit thin on the ground. And, you know, from what we understand, as you mentioned, there's the rare earth element of this agreement, but that could potentially just be temporary. As far as tariffs are concerned, 55% on China, so that's the 25% from previously, 30% from sort of the Geneva Agreement, 10% on the US. So we actually haven't really felt like we've made much progress, but we're actually back to where we were. And as a result, yeah, you know, the S&P 500, it's sitting around the 6,000 mark. It's just not that far from its all-time highs, to be fair, given the level of uncertainty that still exists. And we're still seeing some weakness in the US dollar, which does suggest that there are still concerns over the outlook for the US economy still.
OK, Fiona, thank you very much for that roundup. Thank you. Around the world and across the UK, you're watching BBC News.
From 9 amazing space missions to the times Nessie made a splash, the list charts some of the most remarkable events that have made the headlines. Each episode dives into a new story, from the recent past right up to today, and discover there's a lot more behind the biggest and strangest stories. The List. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
China is an extraordinary country, rich in traditions, and I'm back to immerse myself in its stunning landscapes, steeped in natural beauty. I'll uncover the treasures from ancient civilizations as I meet some of the remarkable people celebrating the art and culture that reveal the secrets of China's soul.
This is just pure magic.
Join me, Alistair Sook, for China's Greatest Treasures on BBC News.
A decade ago, the United Nations set a goal to end child labour worldwide by this year, that is 2025, but progress has been slow. According to a report out today from the International Labour Organization and the UN Children's Fund, UNICEF, almost 138 million children around the world are still being subjected to child labour. Campaigners say children are forced to work, often face harsh or dangerous conditions. They also miss out on education, which compromises their future opportunities and creates a cycle of poverty. Well, Benjamin Smith is Senior Child Labour Specialist at the International Labour Organization, and he's in Grilly in eastern France. Hello, welcome to the programme. We've listed a couple of causes, or rather part of the cycle. Is the main issue there education, and education that these children are not taking up?
Probably the most significant sort of root cause of child labor is poverty. So it's not that parents or children want to work, it's that they don't have sufficient income, parents don't have access to decent work that obliges them to send their children to school. Now, education, of course, is an important factor. Too often, there is not enough schools, not well-trained teachers, and in fact, for children in child labor, they're 4 times as likely to be completely out of school compared to their non-working peers. And those who do manage to juggle work and schooling suffer from attendance issues. They're more likely to drop out.
Ben, was this idea of abolishing child labour by this year, over a 10-year period, just simply unrealistic?
Well, I think it's important to be ambitious in this regard. This is a grave human rights violation for millions of children. I mean, this is a new generation now, 138 million children in child labor. 54 million of them are in hazardous work that directly puts at risk their health and safety. So urgency is absolutely required, and ambition on the part of the international community. We know what works: social protection, education, decent work for parents. The problem is scale, that we haven't been able to implement those measures fast enough or at a big enough scale to accelerate and hit the target.
And why not? Does that come down to the individual governments of where there is an issue with child labour?
Well, there's a lot of variation between regions, and it's important to note in Asia and the Pacific, a decline of 43 million was registered. So there's very good news there. In sub-Saharan Africa, we also saw a decline, but it was more measured. But it was actually quite good news in the sense that the previous report had registered an increase in sub-Saharan Africa. But poverty, persistent poverty, conflict, demographic factors, the child population, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, is growing quite quickly. Now, much faster than and actually child labor is going down as that population is increasing. So it shows that governments are indeed putting in place those measures to prevent and address child labor. But again, scale is what's required.
OK. Benjamin Smith, thank you very much indeed for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
OK, to the world of sport now, specifically football, because in Europe, the beautiful game continues to get richer and richer. Revenues across the European football market hit a record €38 billion last season, according to an annual review of football finance by consultants at Deloitte, with England's Premier League earning the most. Overall, the market grew by 8% on the previous season. Women's football here in the UK is one of the fastest growing parts of the business. Women's Super League clubs saw revenues last season grow by more than a third, 34%. But there's a warning for cash-hungry football bosses. Deloitte says that they can't afford to take their eye off the ball when it comes to their responsibilities managing a community asset. Well, Tim Bridge is the lead partner in the Deloitte Sports Business Group, and he's joining us today from Manchester. Those figures, after just speaking about child labour and poverty, are eye-watering.
They are absolutely eye-watering, and they reflect a real global status for the most popular sport in the world. And of course, when compared to macroeconomic challenges sport and football is once again demonstrating its resilience, really, and its ability to appeal to such a mass market. The live and unscripted drama of football remains one of the key elements of people's day-to-day lives, and the thing that they change their routine for, they change their schedule for. In fact, it is their routine, and that really does underpin the strength of the football industry.
In what way is football a community asset?
Well, I think it's the clubs themselves that are the key community assets. There is a real balance in the industry now that's needed between this insatiable growth for more revenue, more cash to invest into assets that then generate revenue. But ultimately, football clubs service and serve the community in which they operate. They're the place where fans gather to watch their favourite players, but also to meet their fellow community members. And I think it's really important that the football clubs themselves don't now forget the role that they have in society, which, in my view, is pretty unrivaled, to be honest.
Okay, so are the fans then getting value for their money?
Well, that's a really interesting question, because it depends how you would characterise value. But I think what we've seen over the last 12 months in particular is a real shift in the fan narrative, particularly in this country. I think we're seeing more fans now ask the question around ticket pricing, around whether they are receiving value for money in a world where all of the different stakeholders are looking to just drive more football and more football and more football. Actually, I think it's the fans who are now starting to say, well, hold on, actually, is more better? And does that work for me? Because it certainly doesn't at times with simply an increased price.
Okay, and talking about not working for particular segments of the beautiful game, I wonder if the idea of players suffering burnout because of this pressure to play, to earn, they've got these eye-watering salaries, but also what's expected of them.
I think this is becoming a real challenge for the industry, and one that it really needs to look at very, very carefully. So whatever anybody is paid, at the end of the day, they are human beings, and the human body is limited by the amount of activity that it can carry out. And also, what fans love is the best possible competition. So that's the best versus the best, or the best drama that can possibly take place. And if a player is suffering from burnout or is playing too much, then unfortunately they can't compete at that level. And so again, this comes into the overall view that the industry now needs to take around, well, actually, what is its future direction? Is it to ensure that there is a limited amount of football that creates the best value for everybody, broadcasters, fans, all of the stakeholders around the world?
Can I just jump in very quickly, Martin? I've got about 20 seconds. Going back to this community aspect we spoke about, is there a particular club that does well when it comes to community engagement?
Well, there's a whole host of clubs actually across the country that do amazing work in their local communities. Each of them has a community programme funded by the Premier League. We don't talk about it enough, I believe, as an industry, but each of those clubs has a phenomenal impact in their local community.
OK, well, do you know what? Another time, another conversation then. Tim Bridge, thank you very much indeed. Stay with us. More news coming up at the top of the hour.
Hello, there are three main ingredients in our weather story for the next couple of days. Some warmth, some humidity and some thunderstorms. Those thunderstorms drifting up from the southwest. Across the southwest of England, Wales and Northern Ireland, we will see some very heavy thundery downpours through the day. Could be enough rain in places to give some localised flooding and travel disruption, with some thunder and lightning and potentially some squally gusty winds as well. A few scattered showers and thunderstorms breaking out across central, eastern and northern parts of England. Much of Scotland will be dry. It's going to feel very warm and very humid. In the sunny spots, highs of 24 or 25 degrees. So outbreaks of rain, perhaps still thundery in places, drifting northwards during Thursday night and on into Friday. Could turn quite murky around some western and southern coasts. Still quite warm and quite humid, 11 to 15 degrees as we start Friday morning. On Friday, we will see some spells of sunshine, some scattered showers and thunderstorms here and there. Some particularly intense thunderstorms just starting to push up from the south as we head towards the end of the afternoon. Temperatures in eastern England could get to 28 or 29 degrees. Some really vicious thunderstorms are possible during Friday night and into Saturday. But as that weather system clears through, it will eventually turn drier and fresher as we head through the weekend. You can check your weekend forecast on the BBC Weather app.
Anna Foster here in Tel Aviv on an important day, a day when the ceasefire has finally come into effect in Gaza.
The verdicts have come in, all guilty, and now the sentences are being read out by the judge in the court behind me.
We've been seeing the fire's destruction. There's power lines down, smoke is so thick we can barely see more than a few meters in front of us.
People are celebrating in the central Umayyad Square. Civilians and rebels, you can hear the sound of celebratory gunfire.
And as ever, in this kind of a crowd, one person gets pushed, and it ended up that people got trampled on.
There, when the story breaks, BBC News.
Good morning, welcome to Breakfast with Nagamon, Chetty and Charlie State.
Our headlines today. An extra £29 billion a year for the NHS in England, but other government departments feel the squeeze after the Chancellor's spending review.
Yes, transport, the environment, crime and justice and council funding among those facing real terms cuts. I'll find out how people have been reacting to the government's decisions.
A third night of violence in Northern Ireland as petrol bombs are thrown at police and a leisure centre is set on fire.
Disposable vapes are still being sold in some shops nearly 2 weeks after being banned.
Good morning. It's going to be very warm and humid today. We've got some heavy, thundery downpours with hail and gusty winds around them that could lead to some disruption. But in between, there'll be some sunshine. I'll have all the details later in the programme.
Good morning. It's Thursday, the 12th of June. Our main story today. The NHS is to be given an extra £29 billion as part of the government's spending plans for the next 4 years.
The Chancellor's spending review saw extra investment for defence, housing and transport, but other departments were hit with budget cuts. The Conservatives have accused Rachel Reeves of adopting a spend now, tax later approach, as our business correspondent Mark Ashdown reports.
The Chancellor claims she's fixed the foundations of the economy. Now it's time to renew and rebuild what she promises will be a better Britain for all.
The priorities of this spending review are the priorities of working people. To invest in Britain's security, in Britain's health, and to grow Britain's economy so that working people are better off.
The Chancellor said the government's priorities in the spending review are health, security and the economy. The day-to-day budget for the NHS in England will increase by 3% in real terms on average over the next 3 years, reaching £226 billion by 2029. The core schools budget in England will go up by 0.4% in real terms every year, reaching £69.5 billion in 2029. But that does include extending free school meals to more children and funding pay rises and building repairs, so the overall budget remains tight. There will be £280 million to tackle small boat crossings and £7 billion to create 14,000 more prison places in England and Wales. But the Home Office day-to-day budget will decrease by 1.7% over 3 years. Any extra police officers might need to be funded by council tax rises. Aside from day-to-day spending, Rachel Reeves also unveiled a raft of big infrastructure projects on transport, energy and housing. The target is to build 1.5 million new homes by the end of this Parliament. One of the big headlines then was this extra £39 billion to be invested to help build more affordable and social homes. The Chancellor hopes it will create more jobs and boost the economy. But questions do remain over whether the government can really deliver on its targets.
The problem is that it takes a long time for that kind of flow of capital to have a big impact on the economy, because the economy is very, very large. But that doesn't make it the wrong thing to do, and actually it's probably one where the government is following the economics rather than the politics, and there has been a really low level of capital investment in the UK that we do think has been a big part of the growth problem that we've had.
The Conservatives described the Chancellor's plan as a spend now, tax later fantasy and said more tax rises were inevitable.
When will we feel better off, Chancellor?
Tighter budgets might be on the way across much of Whitehall with a focus on cutting costs, but Rachel Reeves is hoping her decision to invest in long-term projects can convince voters she has a long-term plan to get Britain moving. Mark Ashdown, BBC News.
Let's speak now to our chief political correspondent, Henry Sethman, joining us now. Morning to you, Henry. So logic dictates, does it not, that if there are increases for some departments, there are cuts in others?
That's right, Charlie. And funnily enough, the Chancellor didn't dwell on those in her speech yesterday. So we've been rifling through the 128-page document that was published alongside the Chancellor's speech to get a sense of who the losers have been from this spending review as well. But even then, it's actually quite complicated to work out. So